on the program today, suspended Member of Parliament, at least for the remaining length of this winter session. Shashi Tharoor joins us. Have you ever been suspended before from anything?
From nothing. I was always a good boy in the class, so it's a particularly, shall we say, remarkable experience for me to be amongst the wicked ones whom the monitor has to punish. But the truth is that it became impossible not to stand in solidarity with all the colleagues who've been unjustly suspended by the system. I won't even blame the speaker as an individual. There is a system at work here. Frankly, I have a feeling they have not even got the ABCs of parliamentary democracy right. They don't seem to understand that the entire basis for a parliamentary system, as it was created and as we've now established in our country, is for the Council of Ministers to be accountable to Parliament. That's the whole logic of parliamentary democracy. When Parliament is in session, you come to Parliament, you talk to Parliament, you discuss all major issues in Parliament. This government will only see Parliament at its convenience, will attend Parliament at its convenience. The Prime Minister hasn't been seen for days, and will only speak to it on issues it chooses to consider convenient to speak on. So this issue, there's a major breach in Parliament security. There was a great deal of concern amongst the opposition. They asked for a statement from the Home Minister. He's been giving statements to the media, mind you. He's been issuing statements, giving interviews and so on. But while the Parliament is in session, his fundamental duty of coming and speaking to the Parliament, he has completely ignored. So that's a basic tenet of parliamentary democracy cast aside. The second request of the opposition was that there should be a discussion on the overall issue, starting, of course, with the Home Minister's statement. That discussion hasn't happened either. And those who have requested the discussion were suspended. So the result was each of us felt, out of solidarity with our colleagues, that when those who want democracy are being kicked out of the temple of democracy, then the temple of democracy is no longer fit for worship.
Do you believe that there is a danger of a redundancy of parliamentary proceedings if, for example, by the end of this winter session, all of the opposition members of parliament are out? Bills are still being passed. The BJP still has the numbers.
Well, that's exactly the point. The bills can be passed anyway, but the whole purpose of parliamentary debate is, number one, to hear a wide representative selection of views from across political representatives throughout the country. Secondly, to place significant objections on record. In fact, the Supreme Court pointed out last year in a case that when there is no debate in Parliament on a piece of legislation, it is impossible for the judiciary to understand legislative intent. And therefore, the debate, even if the result is a foregone conclusion, is important in itself. Because when we in the opposition point out what's wrong with the bills, the government stands up and explains itself, defends itself, or justifies the way it's drafted the bill, or better still, if it changes the bill, which this government almost never does, then the judges also have a good basis when a case comes up to be able to judge what the government intended to do. Now, all that has gone by the board, and what they're doing quite simply is today already, since I was suspended just before lunchtime, we have seen 3 bills being introduced hastily, quote unquote, debated by their own side and passed. That's no democracy. It's a travesty of parliamentary democracy. And I fear that it's an insult to the spirit of the Constitution that Dr. Ambedkar and his colleagues have given us 73 years ago.
More on parliamentary democracy in just a moment. But as you said, you've always been the proverbial good boy. I take it that personally, in normal circumstances, you're not a fan of disruptions that lead members of parliament to the well.
No, I'm not a fan for a number of reasons. I think that, when you're in an institution, you abide by the codes of that institution. And that applies to you whether you're in government or in opposition. So normally, I tend to argue, first of all, in favor of upholding the standards of parliamentary behavior and decorum that are conventional to Parliament. Indeed, I remember when I first became an MP in 2009, a sort of course was offered to us about do's and don'ts, and it was chaired and addressed by no less than Pranab Mukherjee himself. So it was something that was conveyed to us as something of great importance. Mind you, that didn't stop the BJP, which had the numbers in those days, from frequently paralyzing the House during our time, but that's another matter. At least we felt we were upholding the right standards. But when we came into the opposition, I'm afraid the golden rule, many of you have been to missionary schools, you've heard the golden rule, do unto others as you should have them do unto you. Well, the golden rule in Parliament is do unto others what they have already done unto you. And so the opposition decided to do to the BJP what the BJP had done to it. And we've seen disruptions again. And I've argued within opposition spaces that this is never a good idea, because especially when you have very modest numbers, as we do by comparison with the BJP, who had more than double the numbers we had when they were in opposition. So given the numbers we have, it's rather easy for the government to pass bills amid the din, or as they've done this time and on occasion last time, they would simply suspend enough people and then go ahead and do what they want to do. So the problem is, because of the disruption, the opposition loses an opportunity to place its point of view on the record, to raise questions to ministers under question hour, to place constituency matters before the public in 0 hour, to introduce matters of public importance under Rule 377, and of course to participate in debates on subjects that matter, and seek therefore on those debates the guidance of the House, as well as in many ways just place things on record for posterity. I know some of my speeches in Parliament in losing causes on debates which were bound to end with the government getting a lopsided majority have enjoyed an excellent shelf life on YouTube, and I've watched and have witnessed very many larger numbers of views than I've ever had, obviously during the day itself in Parliament. And so, to my mind, all of these are good reasons for us to ensure that we actually participate in debates rather than disrupt. But very often the government seems to enjoy provoking the opposition, bringing them to the point where they absolutely feel they have no choice but to object vociferously, and then, of course, you can throw them out.
So let me present to you 2 or 3 arguments made by the government today, starting with the Prime Minister, who addressed the parliamentary party meet of the BJP. And at this meeting, he said that the opposition, while demanding a discussion and a statement on the security breach, actually contains members of parliament who have justified this breach. His reference clearly was to Rahul Gandhi, who linked the breach to unemployment numbers in India. This is the statement coming from the Prime Minister. How do you respond? That actually, while suggesting that this is a very serious breach, it could have, been much worse than it was, lives could have been lost, actually, Mr. Gandhi, your leader, has justified, according to the Prime Minister, the breach that took place.
Well, I wouldn't see that as a justification. I think it was an explanation. He was obviously deploring the breach while saying that the breach occurred because people are so desperate in their situation of unemployment that they would do almost anything to draw attention to their problem. We in Parliament have tried to draw attention to unemployment by raising the issues, by asking for discussions under particular rules. There's a rule called 193 in the Lok Sabha, under which we wanted a discussion on unemployment. We weren't granted it. So to that degree, Rahul Gandhi is making the point, it seems to me, that let's not forget that though what they did was a terrible thing, this was what led them to do it, according to their own statements, as reported in the media and after their police interrogation. So it seems to me that there's a difference between an explanation, which is what he was giving, and a justification, which is what he's being accused of doing.
Were you comfortable with those statements from Mr. Gandhi? Would you have made those statements right after the breach?
Okay, that's not a question that's fair to ask. I mean, you ask the person who made the statements. This is the way I heard the statements, and this is the way I've understood them.